There's a lot to enjoy about Starfield. Sure, it's not for everyone, not everybody likes the game, and when you're trying to sell a video game to millions of players, it's never going to please everybody. But even for those that are enjoying Starfield monumentally, such as myself, there is still room to improve it through potentially free updates that can be handled in between their current updates and DLC plans. How is it going, everybody? My name is DeMarco, and today I want to dive into a handful of such improvements that can be made to the game to make it better, something that I think would improve Starfield both from a quality of life perspective as well as provide new content, especially for some gamers who finished New Game Plus not once, not twice, but 3 and even 4 times already. And as much as I'd like to see something totally overhauled, like for example planets looking more alien, more in line with what we saw in some of the concept art images that were shown off before Starfield released, and maybe a planet like this is out there and I haven't found it yet, but do keep in mind before you start commenting that these are meant to be smaller and more manageable changes that can be done completely free to players. Just do keep that in mind. With that said, let me know what you would like to see down in the comments below.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
And first, I think we should dive into one of the elements that I was honestly really impressed by, which are the massive cities that do appear in Starfield. Having larger cities has always been this element that Bethesda fans have asked for and craved, and with Starfield, you look at New Atlantis, and you've definitely gotten it. Now, that does come with a couple drawbacks that I personally have noticed. I know many others have as well. For example, you now just have a bunch of mindless NPCs walking around in circles that are doing nothing of any consequence. Makes sense for a larger city, you're going to have a lot of that, but does it take away from some of the elements of what we loved in Skyrim? In one particular case, I think so. Do you remember when Bethesda was talking about Fallout 4 and Skyrim, and they were mentioning how the games put such an emphasis on the NPCs having identities and having unique schedules and personalities? And of course, there were these moments where you really needed to talk to a particular NPC and they were nowhere to be found because they were going about their day. Sure, it was annoying, but it was believable and realistic, and the world didn't revolve around you necessarily. With Starfield, that seemingly is lost. The NPCs are more like what you get in other games where they just sort of mosey around where they need to. They wait for you, the player, to come up to them so that they can tell you about their problems, and they will just perpetually stand there forever, doing nothing. Nothing at all. Shops are open 24 hours a day with the exact same NPC manning the counter, and it's not even as though they go to different parts of the store that they might be in. They will just sit at the counter, standing there.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
At all times, never leaving. I'm pretty sure they're androids from Fallout. The same universe theory, start those things coming. A subtle but important change that I think you can have to make NPCs feel a lot more alive and the world feel vibrant and help provide some of that distinguishing features that Bethesda games typically have over other open world RPGs is to update some of the NPC actions so that they actually do change the staff member that's there. They close down their shops at certain times of day. To go even further, if NPCs actually had shifts where they would get replaced by another NPC, at least temporarily, and the dialogue for that character doesn't need to be extensive. If they're just a stand-in while the other character is going to sleep or doing whatever, you can buy stuff from them, sell stuff from them, and ask where the actual store owner is. That's all it needs to be. Maybe if you're lucky, you walk around New Atlantis and you find a shopkeeper that's doing something around in the city, and you're just like, hey, what's going on? They say, nope, not buying or selling right now. I'm doing my thing. Leave me alone. I would love that. It seems like such a small detail, and it really is, but it's something that I didn't realize I noticed as much until it was taken away. And for Starfield, I think this is feasible for them to, in some capacity, add it back into the game. So shopkeepers and some of that AI could use general improvements, but companions are not off the hook. They also could use some adjustments and some improvements. For example, commanding them to do certain things, the way you seemingly could in most past Bethesda games of modern day. Even in Fallout 3, you could ask Dogmeat to go off and find a particular resource for you, but in Starfield, none of that's here. You can't ask them to move to a certain spot, pick up an item, do an action. It's just not possible, and I have no idea why. I don't know if this was an oversight or if they just determined using player data that it wasn't a feature people engaged with enough, but as far as companions go, it definitively feels like a step backward, and it's not something so complicated that they couldn't add it back into the game as a part of a larger quality of life update. And speaking of NPCs and AI on a broader level, just having some general combat improvement, both how companions act in combat as well as the enemies, would not go amiss if we saw in patch notes that there were some changes to the behaviors and how they moved around and fought, and that would be appreciated. I would love to see it. We constantly hear Todd Howard talking about how the AI difficulty can be completely intense and hard and impossible, but that's not fun for players, so they purposely dumb it down. And that's not something that's unique to Bethesda games. That's almost every game publisher ever. We know that if you turn AI to the absolute maximum, it will crush a player. Play a fighting game, any fighting game, turn the difficulty up to the highest possible thing and try to beat your way through that. It's not easy unless you've practiced. But it's about finding that balance, finding something that works. It's fun for the player to go off and just kill some enemies and have a good time, but also provide some semblance of threat and challenge that it makes you think a little bit more tactically about how you approach situations, and it's their job as developers to find a good balance for that. You remember how every wishlist series for every modern Bethesda release in the history of forever has almost always included in some form or another mention of wanting a survival mode in the game at launch, and then Starfield, a game primed to have such a feature, didn't have it? This is my call to action for Bethesda to update Starfield with a free survival mode update. From the get-go, when Bethesda was talking about Starfield, Todd Howard and the team were mentioning how star travel is meant to feel dangerous, exploration is dangerous, that's why a lot of people don't do it, and yet with the current way the game is formatted, a lot of planets, whether they have very high temperature conditions or they have bad atmosphere that you need to account for, you could more or less land on it with any suit that you're wearing, do the mission that you have, and get out before it really becomes a problem. A hardcore survival mode on top of introducing the eating and the drinking and the sleeping that's part of these experiences. Typically, I want to feel the punishment of walking into a blazing hot planet completely unprepared, melt my character down from the furies of hell itself for not planning accordingly with the proper spacesuit that could handle the conditions on a planet. I do understand Bethesda incorporating this later on after the game is released to get some players to come back, especially if there's some DLC that's coming down the line, and you could kind of merge the two somewhat to get players invested back into Starfield after it's been out for a while. So I totally get it. I wouldn't want to see survival mode attached to the Creation Club in any capacity. If anything else, like they did with Fallout 4, it got a lot of goodwill for Bethesda. People were very excited about it, and they have an opportunity to continue to build that positive relationship with their community by offering it again in a very similar way. Last, and I know this one is a bit more of a stretch than some of the others that I presented here, but adding additional traits to Starfield. I love the trait systems. It's one of my favorite things that they put into this Bethesda game. Once again, borrowed from some of their past titles. I want to see it in the Elder Scrolls 6. I want to see it in Fallout 5 and Starfield 2, and I would love to be able to get them to continue to update the game with some new ones to experiment, especially for players who have completed the game multiple times and are looking for some new ways to tweak and change their experience the next time they go through it. I could tell that Bethesda had a lot of fun making some of them. This was a great way to incorporate some phenomenal Easter eggs like the Adoring Fan appearing again. There's no better way that I think they could have done it. References to Pokemon with the way that kid stuff is handled. So again, it doesn't need to be this gargantuan amount, but especially as a free update, it would be great to see the new ways that players start to approach different characters and how people might roleplay certain characters if there was a wider availability of traits that were present on top of the already exciting ones that are there. So I just think it's a little bit of that extra goodwill goes a long way for fans. Anyway, let me know the quality of life changes or gameplay updates you'd like to see down in the comments section below as part of free updates. I'm excited to hear your guys' ideas, but as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.